Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Discussing a Murderer. This is Jeff Jones, and with me today, again, back after a summer break, is the panel. We'll start from the top today. Kelly, how you doing? How did you enjoy your week off from the damn thing?
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I had a wonderful week off. It was my husband's 40th birthday, so we spent some time together as a family and celebrated that. But it's good to be back.
Yeah, good to have you back, Big Jeff. Welcome back.
Hey Jeff, I was this close to solving the case. If only I had another week, I think I've been able to get it. But I'm going to have to put it back down now to pursue the podcast, and looking forward to getting back into it.
He's only 1 week away from the solution, guys. That's what I think. That's all I could hear. That's all I heard. Dr. Silkman, nice to
Hey,
see you.
yeah, likewise. It's good to be here and to continue our great series. And yeah, fantastic. Thank you for welcoming us back. And hi to everyone on the panel and in chat.
We left off with lawyer Dean Strang, talking about that the three charges would be dropped, but there's still three charges left for Stephen to have to deal with, have to defend, and that only one of those charges really matters, and that's the murder charge. And so we start this episode 8 with that in mind, and this episode is called "The Great Burden." And so, without any further ado, here we go.
Now I can't find it. I thought it was over here. Maybe I came too fast, huh? Here. I did that when he was in prison. Oh, I was gonna raise fish. Me and Steve. That's why I put this building up. I made those tanks. I made my own farms. I just wish that, he could.
There's nowhere that Stephen Avery will be able to go to get his reputation back if he wins this trial. He didn't commit the rape he did 18 years for. We know he didn't commit the rape he spent 18 years in prison for. Where did he get his reputation back for that? He didn't. He never did.
Isn't it ironical that you had Papa Avery go in the garage and look at the name Stephen on the concrete? Because the irony was that in 1985, Stephen was involved in pouring concrete on the premises, right? I don't know if that was the concrete that they were working on, and he had 16 alibi witnesses saying that he was there on the property pouring concrete, and it's sort of like really sad that you see his father, very discolourant, very upset with what happened to Stephen. And I think you can see that Dean Strang here made a very good point about, how you're going to recapture your innocence, the concept of being innocent. And we all know that came about by the aggressive nature of Mr. Kratz and his press conference, right? How do you unring that bell? And, guys, see the way they paraded Stephen into that place, all dressed in the prison garb, and he's got protection on his head. He looks like an absolute Hannibal Lecter. Completely crazy, guys.
so important to the state's case that he did not get out on bail. That is one of several reasons.
Yeah, you made a really good point there, Big Jeff, a really good point about raising up the bail and making sure that he doesn't get home, free. So, they just paraded him like a monkey. It's just simply shocking.
Is to be accused is to lose. Every time. What you can hope to get is your liberty back, eventually. That's all you can ever hope to get.
Interesting parallel with Johnny Depp, right? I mean, he wasn't nearly as dastardly an accusation as it was with Stephen. But where did Johnny Depp go to get his reputation back? Right? He had to go to court. He had to pursue something as Stephen pursued the 1985 suit, and he at least got some partial compensation back. Although he did lose in other countries, right? So
yes,
yeah.
In the United Kingdom. But you're correct, Big Jeff. Once you get accused of something, the way the system is, it can actually cost millions and millions of dollars to clear your name, which is truly, unremarkable when you think about it.
Yeah, that's the expression that's coming in vogue that I hear is the process is the punishment. So it's not like you have this separate due process phase followed by a punishment phase. When the feds charge you of something, it is going to cost an inordinate amount of money to defend yourself against that. Look at the ratio of money that the state spent versus what Stephen had to spend. He had $400K to the people are pleading guilty now to federal crimes just because
Yes.
it's basically a plea that they don't have the money anymore to be able to continue their own defense, because it's that burdensome. Because you need experts, you need high-priced lawyers. The process itself is the punishment more than the punishment's going to be the punishment. And people should pay attention to that, because that is definitely an infringement on today's civil liberties. And that, please, if you're in the chat thinking about that, applying this to other cases, to what you see in the news every day, pay attention to it and recognize that the process is the punishment.
Sure is. Yep, to go through the ringer like that will take a lot out of you, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and financially. Something is not right.
I mean, you can just see that on the simplest of simple examples. You get a speeding ticket, and you're not really concerned about paying the money. It's that you have to go to court for it, right? It changes. You're like, oh, I can't just pay some money, and like, no, you have to go in front of a judge. You were doing 20 over. This is not just this is outrageous that I have to go in, right? And so just on the smallest infraction, you can see how that it's part of the process. You did something wrong, and now you have to come in, and that's, but the abuse of that, I think, is what you were getting at, Big Jeff, right? It's the abuse of that process, like charging people with things that you kind of think, yeah, we'll probably drop these later anyway, but it's enough to keep you in jail right now.
100% correct. For Stephen, it was enough to keep him in jail. For others, when you hear people plead, to try and prove political points, whenever you hear somebody say this person pled no contest to this, it was because they wanted to get the investigation out of their lives. They couldn't afford to continue to defend themselves anymore. And sometimes on the political side, all you need is a no contest plea to be able to sort of say, prove your point politically. And very often that's what they're interested in being able to do, is just associate you with guilt, because pleading no contest is not the same as being found innocent, and that's very well aware. And if you sort of marry that to some type of wrongdoing story from some narrative that some politician or crooked DA is trying to cook up, then that's typically, in my mind, where it stems from many times, not all the time, many times, just because people can't afford to fight this anymore. How many resources do you have? How long are you going to be out of work? How long are you going to tolerate your reputation being smeared for? You just can't afford it.
Yeah, and not only that, if I could just make the point, now you could understand why Mr. Kratz wanted to go the easy route by getting Brendan Dassey to do a brand new interrogation with Fassbender and Wiegert, sign a piece of paper, hand that piece of paper to the judge, and that's it, right? But the mere factor that Brendan didn't play ball, didn't want to accept a plea deal, that meant that the state had to go through the forensic route, and hence the great length of time and expense to do that trial. Yeah, certainly was a game changer.
Reasonable doubts are for innocent people.
Reasonable doubt is reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt is that there are other people who could have possibly done this. I don't see a viable motive that the accused actually did this. The state hasn't made a very good case for this. There's a lot of reason for reasonable doubt, not just because you're innocent. Just unbelievable that he would say that. If I could plug Mark Hodnott's recent suite of videos, I'd sure appreciate it. Mark is a good friend to Stephen, and he published a 3-video series with a guy by the name of Rick Mahler, who is the juror that got sent home because he called and found out that his stepdaughter was in a car accident and his wife was having a little bit of trouble dealing with it on her own. He asked to be excused, and he has some reasonably vivid and important memories from that. And he tells about the fact that when they went into the jury room, in the first place, took that vote, and it was, but I'm going to get the numbers wrong. Maybe you can help me, Tony. I think it was
7 not guilty,
7, yep.
3 guilty, and 2 undecided.
Yeah, and somehow they managed to. Those 7 had very much reasonable doubt, and it's just fascinating to hear what Rick says happened subsequently in that jury. He got dismissed rather early, but his hearsay conversations with several of the people on the jury are just fascinating to hear. You should go watch that video. I wonder if we're going to see any of that in Kathleen's subsequent subsequent filing, that she has an affidavit from one of those jurors who engaged in vote trading off. If you vote guilty, if you vote guilty on the murder charge, then I'll vote innocent on the mutilation of a corpse charge, because those 2 things don't reconcile, and that'll be the basis for him. Of course, not true. So it's kind of manipulation. And 2, of course, one of the jurors being the father of a Manitowoc County deputy, and another one having a very close relation as well. Just as fascinating, the interaction. So I think it's worth a watch if you want to understand about the jury deliberations. They don't get into that a lot on this one.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Big Jeff. And it goes to show that despite the investigation being so crappy, 7 people initially found Stephen Avery not guilty. And that's scary, right? Considering that in the Stephen Avery trial, there was a real lack of experts on Stephen's side, right? And one can only imagine if Kathleen Zellner's experts were present at the time of the Stephen Avery trial, how that could have made a big difference. And Big Jeff made a very good point about what happens in a jury. And if you ever want to see a brilliant movie all about this, I mean, it's fictional, 12 Angry Men, right? Goes to show how the power of one person can be so persuasive to change the opinions of others. And check it out, because obviously something drastic happened in the Stephen Avery trial for everyone to go from guilty, undecided, not guilty, to then unanimous guilt. So that's a very, very scary proposition.
Yeah, I think that is listen to Mark's video, and then go over
Yes,
to the Foul Play channel and listen to the voir dire, the voir dire for that particular juror, and the judge saying, "Do you think you can be impartial?" Oh, of course I can be impartial. And then listen to what Rick says this guy says. What they walk in, after taking that vote, the guy crosses his arm. He's guilty as shit. So yeah, you can be impartial, right? That you're showing a great job of it. What a crock of shit.
correct. Correct.
Let me turn for a moment to some of the evidence that's lacking that you would expect to find if Mr. Avery was really guilty. No blood spatter on the walls or the ceiling. No bloody trail of a body being carried out of that bedroom into the garage or into the burn pit. Nothing on the carpet, nothing on the back stoop, the deck, anywhere. No scratches on the headboard. No rope fibers on the headboard. Nothing that would indicate somebody restrained, struggling for their life, who was murdered in that bedroom.
This is one of the points I wanted to make about what was just said. We've brought this up on this podcast. I know it's come up in conversations talking about this case. It's the evidence that isn't there. This is constantly a theme that we see over and over again. It's the things that aren't there that should be there. I think we've been saying this maybe from episode 1 when we were talking about there's no blood in that room. Yeah, or maybe episode 2. I can't remember. It's been so long. But that's the point I want to make, that this theme continues. And here Jerry is laying it out. There's no evidence of a struggle on the bed. There's no DNA. There's no marks on these things. Nothing. We don't find anything where this tremendously atrocious and horrible crime took place.
Correct. And the the answers to all of those questions that you proposed there, Jeff, was from the forensic units themselves, right? The forensic teams, the crime scene units would have gone through Stephen Avery's trailer, gone through his bedroom, gone through the garage, and come out and said, boys, nothing's here. Nothing has happened here. And if you have a look at the faces of the people in the court, you have a look at them. They're sort of thinking, yeah, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't look right. It's a pity that Buting didn't have a PowerPoint slide and absolutely listed all of those points and put it up on the screen so that the people in the jury and the judge can say, yeah, this doesn't look right. Put those points up, reinforce those points, because sometimes a point you're trying to make can get lost because you're giving a lot of information. Put it down there. Show why no crime took place in his trailer, the bedroom, and the garage. Emphasize it.
I couldn't agree more. I'm a career educator. This is what I do. Dissemination of information, and it's important not to overload people. If you give them
Correct.
too much at once, you have what's known as cognitive overload, and nothing gets through. And so you have to be careful to break it up and use very and I think if you asked them, would you had you done this all over again, would you hit these bullet points and do exactly what Dr. Silkman said? I think they would agree. It's going to be more effective to put those words, because you only say those words once. Yep. But they can read those words as many times as they're sitting there with nothing else to look at, and their eyes are going to focus on whatever print is in front of them, and they're going to, even if they're not listening to you, they're rereading what you've wrote. And I think you made a really stellar point there, Dr. Silkman. For once in a while, I can inject some of my specialty into the case, which is not very often. But yeah, I hope you appreciate that angle. Thank you.
I have to agree with that. I really do. I think, simplify it for people to understand it is the way to go. But I also just heard what Big Jeff brought to the table in terms of reminding us that one of the jurors had already made his mind up. Would have really changed. they got 7 people to change their verdict to guilty. So no matter, I'd hate to say it, but I think it's fair that we're all there probably at this stage that I don't think really anything would have changed that we could have done different in this case would have changed it, because it only takes that one bad juror to influence the rest, and the game was over before it was even won.
Then I have a question. Then wouldn't you come to a hung jury? Then wouldn't it be possible that if they couldn't come to a unanimous verdict, that you had that one guy that wouldn't change, then it would be a hung jury, and they would have to go through this again. They'd have to get a new jury selection, and the process would start over.
Yeah,
I mean, that is.
But I don't think it was ever going to go that way, because we would have seen it. We didn't. The outcome is the outcome because of the personalities that were on that jury. So I don't think there was going to be a hung jury. I think that it was always going to be influenced by this one Manitowoc father-in-law or whatever he was. He had a direction, and he made sure everyone got on his train, and they fucking choo-chooed all the way to the end. And of course, and it's, this case is in terms of, what doesn't make sense in the case of what isn't there, and like you just brought up Jeff Jones and what we just heard Buting say. But I also like to play a game in this case called Why Didn't They? And why didn't they put blood on the key fob if they were putting blood in the car? Why didn't they put DNA of Teresa's in the trailer if they were planting him in her RAV? There is so much of an opposite to this. There's a black and white side of this case. There's the nefarious, then there's the non-nefarious, and then there's that, the devil's advocate side. Like, and it doesn't just go for law enforcement, it goes for the real killer too. Like, why didn't they remove all the bones that, like, it's one of those why didn't they? And it's one of those things that I started writing a list, and it's why didn't they? And then when you go through it, you kind of look at it and you go, huh. And then it goes back to timing. Is it the timing? Were they not aware of Teresa at this time, so they didn't want to put her here because they weren't sure? They wouldn't want to go putting her in the trailer, and then 2 days later she rocks up and was like, yes, sorry about that, I was broken down, I was staying at a mate's around the corner for 2 days. Like, there's those little variables that you have to take into consideration. But in terms of the case itself, there's a lot of why didn't they as well, that kind of points to the fact that maybe it's never as nefarious as we think.
So I think all those points were absolutely brilliant, Cal, as usual. I'd like to return to the original question and Dr. Silkman's point about the lack of evidence. And in my mind, the most laughable, guilt or aphorism in this case is that there's no evidence of planting, as if like the Goodyear blimp had this, a camera pointing down or something, and it would be on tape. The best evidence of planting is the fact that there's not other evidence there that should be, particularly in the garage, where you're going to argue that you found a bullet that went through Teresa enough to have her DNA on it, but yet there's no blood spatter, and there's a complete lack of forensic evidence elsewhere, as Dean just pointed out. That is evidence of planting. That suggests to me the reasonable doubt that this evidence isn't valid, because you cannot not have this stuff, right? There has to be blood spatter if somebody gets shot. You can't not have it. Where is it?
Correct. Correct.
So that is the evidence that this stuff is just not kosher, and that is reasonable doubt. And to say reasonable doubt is for the innocent is just a crock of fucking shit, Ken. I'm sorry.
Correct. And you're correct, Big Jeff, and also Kelly. It's what you don't find that is disturbing. That's the key thing. What you don't find, right? A doesn't necessarily follow B following C. And it's incredible how The same argument was presented in Brendan Dassey's trial about the fact that you would find nothing against Brendan Dassey, absolutely nothing, no forensic evidence, right? And all Mark Wiegert could say was that 5 days to clean up. That's it. Because he must have known himself how ludicrous the situation was. You find a bullet, where's the blood spatter, right? You find nothing in the bedroom. Yet, according to Brendan, all these horrible things had to happen to Teresa. Where is the evidence? There isn't any, which means that you've got to cobble together a story. Even the RAV4 itself makes no sense, because you're talking about someone who's bleeding in the RAV4. Where's the other blood drops? Where are the blood drops that connect the other blood drops? There's something not right. So hence, as Big Jeff alluded to, and Kelly, it's what's missing that's just as disturbing as what was found. The evidence doesn't make any sense. And Big Jeff, you're correct. That does point to a planting scenario. How can you prove planting? You can't unless someone comes forward and says, yeah, I'm the one that did it. Right, so it's very difficult. There's no test for planting.
That's right. Yeah, what can you do? So just a quick one on Kelly's point. And it's a brilliant point, and it deserves to somewhat to be addressed. I'll make my feeble attempt at addressing it. And my answer to her is, had it not been for Laura Riccardi and Moira Demos, everything they would have done, you can argue was exactly perfect. They 100% accomplished their objective. Stephen and Brendan are rotting away in prison. It's going to be very difficult for Kathleen Zellner has to pull off the Hail Mary of all times to get Stephen out at this point. So could they have done more? Yeah. Could they have presented a more convincing case? Yeah. But now we're looking at it as trying to have to convince, 4 educated people on the panel who are looking at this with 20/20 hindsight, as opposed to, 12 jurors in the moment, complicated case, long case, weeks and weeks of testimony. They might not have the ability to sort of sew it all together that we do in retrospect with the transcripts and everything else. They did enough. Could they have done more? Yeah. If this were a television show, should they have done more? Probably so, because we're picking it apart. And yeah, they should have. If they had the blood, they should have put. They should have mixed DNA. They should have put more of Teresa's DNA in the bedroom, right? But why did they not put some in there if they really framed him? I'm not sure they thought of it at the time. I just don't. I can't answer that question. But what I can say is they did enough to accomplish their objective. And should they have done more? Probably. Why didn't they? I don't know. As you say, Kelly, maybe it does point to non-nefarious behavior by certain individuals who we have, our suspicions against. Maybe so. I don't know. I find myself having trouble getting past what I perceive as the injustice here. So I'm going to continue to point out everything, even if some of those things are explainable through non-nefarious things. I don't know what else to do.
Defense argued that there was no blood that was found in the trailer. Since Teresa wasn't killed in the trailer, there shouldn't be. But what was found in the trailer is extremely important. They found an Auto Trader magazine and a bill of sale.
Is that extremely important to see that? Is that extremely important evidence, Dr. Silkman?
This fucking blows my mind, right? So imagine if a salesperson comes to your house and you purchase something and they leave a booklet and a bill of sales. Oh my God, now all of a sudden, Stephen is the murderer. Look, all that proves is that Teresa Halbach did her job, came to the property, took some photographs, he got a receipt, he got the magazine, exactly as Stephen Avery said. It goes to show one important point here, guys. Ken Kratz had 2 things. Fuck all. And all he presents was a book and a bill of sales. The jury must be thinking, Ken, go home. That's ridiculous. If he had said we had found blood, we had found semen, We had found presence of rope. We have found DNA. Then your ears prick up. All he presented was a bill of sales and a booklet. Wow. Even George Zipra had the same bloody thing. Is he now a killer too? Please, it's embarrassing, guys.
It is, and I think Stephen even said that bill of sale wasn't even from this trip; it was from the previous one. He didn't get a receipt this time, and that receipt's not dated. I don't see a date on that receipt.
No,
she was there 13 times in the past, several months. 13 times.
Correct.
How many stupid receipts are you going to collect? You can't get your money back. He's happy with the service. What's he going to do with the receipt?
Interesting. Well, Stephen says that this was from a previous visit. Obviously, Ken Kratz is saying no. This is from this visit. Well, let's just unpack that just for a second. We'll go under the Ken Kratz assumption. Now, this thing is folded once. You can see there's a fold down the middle, so it has been stowed somewhere. It looks like it's crinkled, but it doesn't look like it's been destroyed. Now, the reason I say that is if there was a scuffle or a struggle, when would be the best time to make this, struggle? When you make at the handoff of when you make contact. Right.
Correct.
So if he's going to say that this is the thing she handed him, and then he went and stowed it properly, folded it, and put it in his billfold, and then went and ran and attacked her, that doesn't make any sense. So if we take a closer look at this bill of sale, and it's interesting that he said that he doesn't believe this is the one, and that maybe he didn't get the bill of sale at the time. So that's interesting. But if we go under Ken Kratz's narrative, there you go. This would be the time to make the struggle, I guess, right?
Stephen doesn't deny that she was there. Stephen doesn't deny that that she handed him a book. So it's not. I mean, there's not any evidence here that contradicts his narrative. If, as the people on this panel think, she came, gave him stuff, and left, how is it evidence of anything?
None. Ken Kratz was clutching at straws, right? And Jeff, you make a really good point, because if you're going to attack Teresa Halbach, it would have to be when you're the closest to her, right? And we know that there's forensic evidence on that back door panel of Teresa Halbach's blood. So she was attacked behind her own RAV4, right? But there's no evidence of any of that taking place on the Avery salvage yard, right? So quite clearly, something is not adding up here.
Was in that trailer. She was in the trailer, but she was not killed in that trailer. Teresa Halbach was killed in the garage. She was killed in Stephen Avery's garage.
Try to put her in his house or garage. Now, this is not blind testing. These agents are telling Ms. Culhane what they want. And this is November 11th. Well, here it is, March. She's working on this bullet fragment now, and she still has not found one item that links Teresa Halbach to Mr. Avery's house or garage. So she's got to feel some pressure.
It's pretty obvious that, to be completely truthful, they had nothing. The state had nothing to present. And if you notice what Mr. Kratz continuously does, he has now admitted that Teresa Halbach wasn't killed in the bedroom. And the reason why he has to say that is because there's no forensic evidence. He has just now admitted that, right? So now he has shifted his story to the garage. Why? Because of the coercion of Brendan Dassey and the finding of item FL. Now, notice how very clever Mr. Kratz is. He knows what Brendan Dassey coerced, confessed to. Stabbing, cutting of the throat, right? Kelly, she's a medical expert. She'll tell you, you cut someone's throat, you're going to bleed. You stab someone in the stomach, that's a site of major blood vessels, major organs. You're going to bleed. Potentially you can die, right? So now Mr. Kratz had to change his scenario from the bedroom where he knows there's no forensic evidence, not one piece of forensic evidence. He now had to shift it to the garage. Why? Because of what Brendan Dassey said and what we get said to Brendan, who shot her in the head. So now he had to shift the murder scenario from the bedroom to the garage. He's got no evidence of anyone being pinned up anywhere in Stephen's trailer and no evidence of any sexual assault, nothing. So now he has to bypass all of that and go to the garage. Unbelievably clever how he's evolving his narrative.
And unbelievably nefarious. What he does to Brendan, it's important for them to introduce Brendan's confession in Brendan's trial, as we'll see. But yet, the confession says a whole bunch of stuff was done to her in Stephen's bedroom. And so, what are you going to believe? Oh my God, the dog! Sorry about that. But what are you going to believe? Are you going to believe that Brendan's telling the truth, but there's no forensic evidence in the bedroom, or that this confession was coerced?
Well, one thing I just want to tie into that is that the crime lab, I could be wrong on this date, but I'm pretty sure the crime lab report saying that she was shot in the head was February 28th. And they take another run at Brendan on the 1st. Is that right? March 1st?
March. Correct.
And so there's only 28 days in February, just to remind everybody. That's the next day. Well, we should double check to make sure it could be a leap year. Was 2006 a leap year?
No.
Yeah. Well, the Fassbender, sorry, Big Jeff, for cutting in. Fassbender and Wiegert knew about the cranial bone fragments with the beveling. So they knew that the victim, in this case, Teresa Horbach, was shot at least twice in the head. So they had that information. No one knew that except the police. And Brendan, you know that when they were talking to him, he never mentioned the shooting scenario. Why? Because it never happened. And it was only Wiegert that had to introduce it before Brendan goes, oh yeah, it was Stephen. So you can see how they're strategizing. They knew what happened to the victim, shot twice, but Brendan never, ever mentioned a shooting scenario.
This is the biggest case of her career. It's the biggest case the crime lab's ever had. It's almost 5 months and nothing's been found.
The physical evidence, the DNA evidence, the eyewitness testimony, the scientific evidence, the big fire we had.
Yeah, you got this is killing me. This is killing me. Eyewitness testimony. Name me one eyewitness person. One. To the crime. If you say Brendan Dassey, why isn't he in that courtroom as your star witness? Right? DNA evidence. What DNA evidence? In the bedroom and the trailer, right? The only DNA that points to Teresa Horbach is on Ida Meffel, which I think we've already debunked 100 times. So notice how Ken Kratz is rifling it off like a shopping list, trying to say to the jury, look at all what we've got. They've actually got nothing. That's the problem. Except, and Kelly will back me up, the blood in the RAV4. That's the interesting piece of forensic evidence. Everything else can be explained. The blood in the RAV is the challenging one, for sure.
We had common sense, all point to one person.
This could be done by 2 officers, really 1 officer. The 1 officer who keeps coming up, Lieutenant Link, whose name's on the evidence transmittal from the 1985 case just a couple of years earlier. Lieutenant Link, who shows up on November 5th without logging in. Lieutenant Link, who finds the magic key. Lieutenant
Notice
Link,
who he's not
who
saying?
4 months later,
Andy Colburn.
Andy.
Yeah, I think
That
we were
kind of
hoping
hurts
we're all
his
thinking that.
defamation case, doesn't it?
It really
Correct.
does. It's a really solid point. Absolutely. That he's not saying Colburn. He's saying Link. And there you go.
Correct. And in a way, the defense had no option but to name somebody, right? You can't go into court and just say, we believe a third party did this. You'll be thrown out. You actually have to name somebody. So that's why there was a direct link to Link. That's why they did it.
Yeah, Mahler speaks specifically to how nervous that he felt Coburn was on the stand.
Oh,
He said
yeah.
he was sweating. He said he was nervous,
Sweating.
and that
Yep.
his testimony was not believable to the jury for those reasons. And so the defense did a good job, sort of making their case and putting him on the spot. So yeah, I'm not.
Well, I hope Netflix subpoenas Mark's videos then, or features his videos of that juror saying that, because he was, although he didn't vote, he was in the courtroom for a lot of it.
For the lot.
For all of it. It was on deliberations. It was when deliberations began that he was dismissed. So he saw everything.
Correct. And that was a game changer as well.
So I guess that was my point, that Mailer, once he was gone, he was the anchor vote for innocence, right? He was the one that, he would have been the leader on innocence. And if you take him out, the other people easily fold under pressure to this other guy. And I think that's what I was saying. Like, when you remove him, was there a potential for a hung jury before the removal of Mailer? That was just my rhetorical question, if nothing else. Not necessarily looking for a direct answer.
I don't. I mean, it would be interesting to know, and I don't think we have know the answer to this, as to whether the jury, had said to the judge that we think there may be sort of an irreconcilable differences between the jurors, and we're not going to reach a conclusion. Very often, the judge will come back and say, just give it a few more hours, or give it another day, or some such. We don't know whether that happened. We don't know whether whether jurors are beginning to feel intimidated. What we do strongly suspect is that there was some horse trading that went on. We have hearsay evidence of that. People say hearsay is not hearsay. Hearsay evidence is not legal evidence, but from the conversations Mailer had with other people on the jury, he said that there was horse trading. That's not legal to do, and that is a sign of this hung jury that you're talking about. It's like, okay, we've been away from our lives for so long. We got bills to pay, we got kids to take care of. How are we gonna get past this? What as people, what compromise are we gonna reach? And you can see after so long, people throwing up their hands and saying, okay, well,
I had enough.
We've had enough. And you can even see people saying, okay, well, if somehow we come to this split decision on the first-degree murder charge versus the mutilation of a corpse charge, and how could the jury ever come to that? Then that's enough to help overturn or give him a good, thing in the second trial. I can see how people would say that, and maybe even how some people would believe it. It's obviously completely not true, but that's not to say that wasn't used that way during the horse trading argument. And it would be interesting to know. It would be interesting to subpoena those people and talk to them. And I think that goes back to the exact point you're making, Jeff.
Yeah, and there's only 3 charges, so it's not too hard for us to figure out which horses were traded, right? Mutilation. Correct. There was only 3, so mutilation of a corpse and murder, right? Those are the 2 big ones. Otherwise, there's the gun charge, right? And even Mailer said he would have voted guilty on that gun charge because Stephen Avery had a gun in his house when he wasn't supposed to, and so we can infer that the horse trading was you vote for the for the murder charge, and we won't vote for the dismemberment of a corpse charge.
Which, when you think about it, is completely ludicrous, right? Because there were cut bones. Teresa Halbach was dismembered, right? And then, to trade votes like that, to say, look, we'll find him not guilty on the mutilation of a corpse. Big fucking deal. If you get convicted of murder, he could have jumped off a rooftop and murdered Teresa Horbach. Once you're convicted of murder, that's it. And Strang told the family, all you need is that murder one charge, all bets are off. You're going to prison for life. So it was sort of like a bizarre way for the jury to potentially send out a message, and it didn't work.
After Manitowoc no longer is needed, with no legitimate reason, is back at that scene on March 1st, and what's found the next day? The magic bullet.
This isn't just two guys. It's Jim Link and it's Andy Colburn. Their livelihood, their reputations, their families, everything in their 20-plus years of law enforcement are on the line when some lawyer accuses them of misconduct. Not just any misconduct, but planting evidence in a murder case.
This does my head in, right? Now, put yourself in Stephen Avery's shoes in 1985, when the same shit that Ken Kratz is now saying in 2007 during this trial applied to Stephen, right? How he was accused of sexually assaulting Penny Bernstein, how his reputation got dragged through the mud, how his family got destroyed, how his marriage ended, how his association with his children ended, right? Isn't it interesting how now the shoe is on the other foot and Ken Kratz is crying crocodile tears for Lincoln Colburn, two MTSO officers that never, ever should have set foot on the property, and we never would have heard about them. And now it's amazing how now he's using reverse psychology for us, for the jury to feel sorry for Lincoln Colburn, and yet none of that applied to Stephen in 1985. Guilty as charged, Your Honor. It really does my head in. And we're doing this because we're covering his book. The same crap is in his book as what he's spewing out here. It's crazy stuff.
So, Dr. Silkman, one question about the book, because it's the question that I have. He does not try, at least from the footage that we saw. Maybe it's in a part of the trial that they don't show. Does he try and offer, or in any way diffuse the fact that they were there at all? Does he say, well, Calumet asked for Manitowoc's help? They knew the area. They, it's their territory. They're familiar with it. And any type of diffusing at all in the book?
No, no. Essentially, it's the same mantra that he says during the court, and Fassbender and potentially Fassbender says the same thing. The MTSO were only there to provide support, and because Lincoln Colburn had experience in evidence handling, we saw no issue in that at all, right? So you've got the coroner who's an expert, and she knows how to deal with forensic evidence. She wasn't permitted to go on the property, threatened with arrest. But Colburn and Lenk and others, free pass, no problems at all. So they never saw, Big Jeff, they never saw an issue of Colburn, Lenk and other officers being on the property. They had no qualms about it. So it was just, as you said, trivialized, brushed off. What conflict of interest? No problems at all.
Thank you.
I have a question for the panel and for the chat. It kind of goes around like a revolving door, because like Dr. Silkman just said, they're crying that, oh, poor Andy, poor Link, but they shouldn't have been even on that, the Avery salvage yard participating period. But my question is this: they had to blame someone. Do we think, or do you guys think, individually or as a group, if they were allowed to introduce Denny and that they were allowed to target a third party, do you think they would have actually made this case more strongly still towards law enforcement's involvement? Or do you think we would have seen another trial completely different? Thoughts?
For me, if they were able to introduce other Dennys, I think Bobby Dassey and Scott Tadich potentially would have been named, maybe even Ryan Hilligus, maybe even Bradley Check. So in other words, yes, I think we may have seen a different trial. But remember, and Kelly, you raise a good point, I don't believe everything we see on that property was the work of the killer, right? I believe it's a two-part event, the killing and the planting. So potentially killers or potential killers could have been named as Denny suspects, and the involvement of law enforcement. Because remember, we're talking about the blood in the RAV4. Who's going to get access to the blood? Oh, we have a blood vial. That's got to be law enforcement, right? So it's a really good question what you ask. I don't think there's an easy answer. But if they could introduce Denny's, no question about it, they would have given a shopping list for sure.
So I think, Kel, maybe so I understand the question. If they had been able to introduce Denny's, would there have been? Do I believe there's a reasonable suspicion that there may have been a different outcome in the trial?
No. Do you think that they Dean and Jerry would have created a different narrative to the defense? Because basically, Ken's always whinging that, basically that stop pointing at these officers, these poor officers, they've got families, but that's the only direction that the defense had, was to point at these officers, because Denny was taken off the table for them. So my question is, as a defense narrative, do we think it would have been a different trial if they were allowed to introduce Denny? So instead of pointing all the fingers at law enforcement saying frame, 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 if they were allowed to say, for example, Bobby Dassey, would they have maybe eased off on the defense of being all law enforcement? You actually hear Dean and Jerry say in, I think it was the first or second episode, no defense lawyer wants to go in and accuse law enforcement of being a part of a frame up or a crime per se. So again, if it's more on the basis of the defense narrative of how they sold Stephen's innocence in terms of who else could have been responsible and what direction the courts would have probably understood a little bit more. Because again, we see the outcome. The Ken ended up using it to his advantage yet again. He said at the end of it, if you want to believe law enforcement had anything to do with it, you then have to be convinced that they killed her as well. So if we didn't have that part of this story, if there was a Denny that was a part of it, do we think it would have been different?
Yeah. So now that I understand your question better, I think it would have had to have been different almost by definition, because they would have had to taken the time to introduce this person as a Denny suspect, potentially question that person on the stand, and then summarize in the closing arguments, and anything that they felt came out of the testimony of the Denny, including, this person had means, motive, and whatever the Denny prongs were. The third Denny prong is proximity. So I think it would have been, by definition, almost different than it would have. I don't think they would have laid off the key, and I don't think they would have laid off item FL, because those are just two gemstones. But they would have had to definitely formed a different narrative. They would have had to have, at least had a narrative about where the line is that Dr. Silkman just talked about, of where did the murder end and the planting begin. They would have had to have said something about that narrative. That might have made it sound less convincing, so they might have tried to blur that line as much as possible.
I think I agree. I think the dynamics of the case would have been very, very different, right? If they were able to present a very strong argument for Denny's, like Ryan Hilligus being an ex-boyfriend, and his involvement, the way he involved himself in the search, and the fact, all the things that we've discussed about, Ryan Hilligus potentially could have been in trouble. But the number one person who I believe would have really been in trouble, and that's Bobby Dassey, right? rightly or wrongly, he would have made a very, very strong Denny suspect. You could have packaged him quite easily as being a potential co-conspirator or murderer, but they couldn't do that. The only third party that they could mention was Brendan Dassey himself, right? So, in other words, the defense teams themselves, they were handcuffed. They weren't allowed to go to any other third party unless they mentioned Brendan Dassey, right? So I do believe that the dynamics and maybe even the outcome of the trial would have been very different had they been able to point to third parties.
I think if I'll take a swing at that one, and my answer is probably going to be more of a question, and that's, would it be easier to sell a jury on one of these other Denny suspects, any of the names that you've already raised, or law enforcement? And I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, it's going to be easier for a jury to accept one of these other Denny suspects than it is to accept the law enforcement angle. And I think that that's maybe the crux of the point that we're trying to get to here, is that by limiting their ability to name other people, they've put a target on the backs of MTSO, because you're not allowing me to actually go and name someone who we actually think did it. You're limiting me to that. You're only allowing me A, Brendan Dassey, or B, pointing the finger at law enforcement. And so to act like they're so surprised that you're pointing the finger at law enforcement,
No force.
It's kind of ridiculous, because they were forced to have that choice.
That's exactly my point, Jeff Jones. That's how I was going to sum it up, because I knew we were all going to go with this, the same thing. I was going to say, so I don't know why they're acting so shocked. They knew this was a false narrative that the defense were going to have to come up with. They knew it. They would have had to have seen it. They knew that they couldn't bring up Denny. They were going to have to focus on someone did it. They had no choice. So I don't know why Ken keeps spouting off shit when, he's a word salad buckwit.
It's a show for the jury.
Correct, Big Jeff, 100% correct. And that's why they wanted to bring in the angle. How dare the defense point a finger at your cops? And you notice, because they weren't permitted to talk about other Denny suspects, Ken Kratz took advantage of it, and he said, hey, if you believe they were the planters, you have to accept they were the murderers. So Ken Kratz took advantage of that. The mere fact that the defense could not name other third-party suspects. So Ken's spooked the jury by saying, your cops, the ones that you call 911 or whoever to get help, your cops were involved in not only planting, but murdering Teresa Halbach, right? So the jury must be thinking, yeah, that doesn't sound right. So what about having an open court system where you can name third-party suspect? That didn't take place, right? And hence why Kathleen Zellner spent so much of her time pointing out to all the third-party Denny suspects, right?
Yeah, because it's your constitutional right to be able to name someone if they meet the prongs. And if you were denied a constitutional right in a trial, that means the trial is flawed and you get a new one. That's almost automatically, well, I shouldn't say almost, it is automatic. If you meet the prongs, and you can show that there's a reasonable possibility that the jury would have come to a different conclusion. And what you said was perfect, Dr. Silkman. That if they were allowed to name Bobby Dassey, that would have heavily impugned his testimony. And so the jury could be wondering, would it be possible that he did leave around the same time and that he followed her out, or that he was telling some story because he's trying to protect himself? And again, that doesn't mean that he's frog marched out of the witness box. This isn't Perry Mason, right? This is a matter of providing a reasonable doubt for the jury that it's not that there's more than one logical conclusion here, Ken. There's other people who and she wasn't Saint Teresa, no, as much as you'd like to put her as Saint Teresa. She led in some ways a dangerous lifestyle, certainly a lifestyle that would have introduced her to people that were suspect. So yeah, 100% agree, Tony. Absolutely.
Yep, 100%. Oh, the point I was going to make, I just remembered it. Guess who the jury asked to see the testimony again and have it read? Which person out of all the witnesses that they wanted more information on?
Bobby's.
Yep, bingo. So you can imagine if the defense were able to name him as a third party, Denny, and present all the evidence that they thought why, I think Bobby Dassey potentially could have been in big, big trouble. Not saying he did anything, but that's the job of the defense, to point to somebody.
We know KZ, we know Kathleen Zellner has pointed the finger at him anyway. So that's a very logical, the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
Right.
Well, that's some rich pudding right there. And that's saying that if she thinks that he's a viable suspect now, working off the same deck in 2005, 2006, there you go. He would be top of the list.
It would have been more powerful. Kelly may disagree, but it would have been more powerful back during the trial, not now. Now you can say, oh, yeah, but this, and this. But the impression back in 2007, if they presented the reason why they thought Bobby Dassey was the murderer or a co-conspirator, I think the jury would have been going, oh, God, okay. Does he satisfy all the prongs? Yes, he does. Did he see the suspect? Yes, he did. Did he give? Did he follow? Did he go leave potentially at the same time when Stephen Avery said she left? Yes. What did he do? He went hunting. Does he have a good alibi witness? Oh, it's Scott Tadich, who happened to be going in the same direction allegedly that Teresa did. Was he viewing potentially contentious pornographic torture porn on his computer? Even if you can't definitively associate when the searches were done, once you attach the name to those torture porn, you're starting to look pretty bad, right? So you can present a very strong case as a potential Denny, right? And back in 2007, I believe that would have been very, very powerful.
One of the things that you kind of just touched on there, had my mind kind of going, was, we always hear about this Bobby Dassey and Scott Tadich identifying each other on the road, and they used that to prove that neither one of them committed the crime. But how does that exclude either one from committing a crime? It absolutely doesn't.
No,
I mean,
it's
go ahead.
Sorry, Jeff. It's an exceptionally weak alibi, right? Because neither of them could really account for what they were doing at that particular moment in time. I understand you're on an isolated road. You drive past each other. You probably wave. You recognize each other's vehicle. Fine. But that doesn't exclude you from nefarious activity, right?
It's only a 20-second interaction if you think about it at the longest, right? Like, oh, there is them, that's them. Okay, hey, I mean, I hate to be gruesome, but how do we know that Teresa Halbach wasn't in the back of Bobby's truck at this time? You know what I'm saying? Or I'm not saying that I believe that. I'm just saying that this is the scenario in a legal argument to make that doesn't mean anything that they saw each other on the road.
No. Once you have that element of doubt, then that's all the jury needs, right? And then when you have, it was too late back then. But imagine if they got the information about what Kevin Ramlow saw about seeing the RAV4 on November the 3rd at the turnaround and talking to Colburn, or he reckons it was Colburn. It could have been another officer, right? If you package all that together, now you can start building a really strong argument. Hey, wait a minute. the state is saying that Teresa or her RAV4 never left the property. What the hell are all these people seeing this vehicle leaving the property or somewhere else? Then you factor in Siebert and John Le Guin, the propane tank driver, and all of a sudden you bring in that element of doubt, right? That's all you need.
What about Blaine's affidavit that he saw Bobby driving a vehicle?
That's right.
So that's an interesting one, and I've always thought about that one, and I've always thought that really does, put a little bit of a dent in the state's timeline. We started to talk about this in a different podcast, but there wasn't really enough time. If you start the timer at the 2:43 phone call, then if Bobby did have something to do with it, then that crossing between Bobby and Scott would have to happen a lot later than they reported happening. And don't we find out that all of a sudden Scott Tadich, didn't get home the time that he said, in the trial, when his memories were refreshed, there's a half an hour, 45 minutes later, that is actually doing this stuff. So that time debt is actually there. But there's, and it was said there's not enough time certainty to be able to understand, but a detailed timeline for what happened, I don't really think was, presented, and nor would the lack of a Denny suspect, you have the opportunity to impugn that timeline. So, yeah.
Correct. And I know we'll talk about it when we do season 2, but just to mention it to the panel and also people in chat. Now, Kathleen Zellner did a reconstruction, right? She got actors to play the certain roles of Teresa Horbach, Bobby Dassey, etc., etc. Now, I'm not saying that event took place, but her reconstruction showed that by the time Teresa Horbach left the property and was murdered was 8 minutes. 8. So when Big Jeff talks about 15, 30 minutes discrepancy, that's more than enough. So the scary thing is, if the scenario was even half true, what Kathleen Zellner did, within 8 minutes, she went from going from the property to being killed that quick. So keep that in mind, because we know that at, I think it was 2:41, her phone stopped pinging. So something happened very, very fast.
And this bioplanting defense is absolutely ludicrous. We only had to call one witness who scientifically could tell you that there is absolutely no way that vial of blood was used to plant.
As we said in the last episode, he attested to the swabs that were provided to him.
3.
And it makes a big difference when you're in a case where officers or the law, whatever, the process is being accused, and then they're going to say, well, we took the swabs, and so now he's going to say that's proof. And I just say it's not proof. That's my point.
I think what would have been very, very interesting, and Kelly will back me up on this, right? And that is if they tested A9, which was the cutting from the seat. If they tested that for EDTA, I tell you what, because that would have blown a couple of minds. What do you reckon, Kelly? If they had tested the actual seat cutting, item
Yes.
A9 for EDTA.
Yes, that could have. Yes, I don't want to get into too much because I know you're in the middle of like designing a presentation to drop, so I don't want to spoil it. But yes.
Yep. I'm doing just to let everyone know, I'm doing a little presentation, only a short one, on the DNA methylation studies, right? And I'll tell you what, it's going to blow everyone's mind, and very, very interesting indeed. I can understand how you can swap swabs. I can understand, I could explain it all. But the car seat cutting, that is indeed very, very interesting.
And if anyone wants to kind of have a baseline to that conversation in the blood podcast we recently just did, me and Dr. Silkman actually dive into that just a little bit more and explain to you guys how incredibly hard it would have been that the A9, which is the fabric seat, if it is Stephen Avery's, which it is, we've got the markers to provide that, but it's harder to swap out. So again, I think Dr. Silkman will cover all this in the presentation, but in terms of a baseline of the conversation, you can always go back to the blood experiments and just have a listen to how we touch base on that. And we really touch base on how important and scary it is for Stephen, potentially damaging, in fact.
It actually dropped my jaw. Put it this way, it dropped my jaw, because now what it does is it leads you to a certain direction, which is going to be very, very challenging for Kathleen Zona or anybody else to explain. Not saying it's impossible, but I haven't worked it out myself yet, and that scared me.
When do you expect that to premiere, that video?
I've done the presentation. I need to record it today, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to upload it. No premiere. I'm just going to upload it as it's only a short video, probably go for about maybe 15 minutes, but it goes through the DNA methylation studies that were done, I think about a year or so ago, and very, very interesting results. So when I finish today's podcast, I'll record it and we'll just put it online. Don't worry, no fanfare. I just want people to have a look, see what they think, leave comments, and we'll take it from there.
Would Lieutenant Link lie? Would he lie as a sworn law enforcement officer? Well, all I can tell you is he did twice, and you heard it. Here he says he arrives at 2 o'clock. When he's asked under oath before, it's 6:30 or 7. This isn't 15 minutes off, folks. It's under oath, and it's a difference of 4.5 or 5 hours. At that time of year, November 2005, it's the difference between broad daylight and pitch black. He was under oath. If and when police officers plant evidence, they are not doing it to frame an innocent man. They're doing it because they believe the man guilty. They're not doing it to frame an innocent man. They're doing it to ensure the conviction of someone they've decided is guilty.
If you buy Mr. Strang's argument that they were trying to make sure that a guilty person was found guilty, then assigning accountability to the murder for Teresa Halbach shouldn't matter whether or not that key was planted.
Big Jeff, you go first, because I'm going to destroy my iPad. You go first.
Well, if you have to say now, if he is essentially saying that if you believe the key was planted, you have an ability to sort of put that aside and look at the other things in the context of the murder. But the problem is that they've been arguing all along that if you you accuse the police of something like this, you do so at your peril. Now they're taking a giant step from where they were, in that it's possible for the police to plant just one little thing, which is going to extend the search warrant for another few days. But no, they were pristine on all these other things. Fine here, but pristine, suspicious here, but fine just about everywhere else. Logically, it makes no sense. He's what did Kel say? It's a word salad. Yeah.
You also said a couple of other words too.
Yeah. That's what it is. Go ahead, Tony.
Well, put it this way. This is brilliant. This is a jaw dropper, right? So Strang actually was feeding him rope, right? Strang was saying, look, guys, the police, they're not going to plant evidence to try and convict somebody who's innocent. They're going to do it because they know they're guilty, right? So he fed him that line. Ken Kratz took the bait and said, hey, look, guys, yeah, I know the key looks fucking suspicious. Even I'm suspicious of that key. What? They just walk in, they shake, rattle, and roll a cabinet, and a key just happens to fall. Of course it's bullshit. Of course they planted it. But what Ken Kratz is saying is incredible. He's saying, don't worry about it. Please forgive these officers, right? They're just doing their duties. And as Big Jeff just alluded to, how can you now tell the difference between a piece of forensic evidence that was planted because the police thought he was guilty to any other piece of forensic evidence found on that property, including the RAV4, the cremains, right? So in other words, if you plant one thing, you have to assume that everything was planted, right? And how do we know that the actual crime scene, the proper crime scene, was at Cuss Road and in the quarry? And these guys were thinking, this is going to be a hard story to sell, to say, oh, yeah, Stephen attacked Teresa Horbach at Cuss Road. What? So what they do is they bring everything back and they put it on his property and say, oh, my God, key, plates, cremains, electronics, yeah, it's all there. We're pointing at you, Steve. But Ken Kratz is now giving an out to people like Lenk and Colburn and asking for forgiveness. They didn't know what they were doing. They just wanted to, he's guilty. He did it. Don't worry about the key. You heard it. That's Ken Kratz. Unbelievable.
It's ludicrous, isn't it? It's just unbelievable.
And he says it in his book too. Same deal.
Well, from one deal to the next deal, it looks like we have some, should we call it breaking news? A new deal here. We have some information that Kelly's going to present about Andrew Colburn and how it fits into what we're talking about.
Let me just say, shout out to AC Rookie. I just got tagged in a tweet and I was like, what's this about? And I was looking at it, and while we were still talking about law enforcement involvement and stuff, he's just put together something really, really interesting. And this is what it says. Colburn wants to be known as an honest cop. He spoke with Stephen Avery on November 3rd, and dispatch was told at 7:20 through to 7:26 p.m. Colburn was at Avery salvage yard. Problem with that is Stephen Avery is nearly half an hour away walking into Menards at that time. So why is AC still at the Avery salvage yard? And then he has attached to that the picture of the dispatch description, and you can see here at 1925-37, location 13920 Avery Road, venue 2 Rivers. You can see that it's cleared from a call unit 5432 location, and then if you go back to the other picture, you have at time stamped at 7:21:06, there is Stephen and Chuck walking into Menards.
Well, that's some pretty powerful information for the Netflix case, and I'm sure that they will be definitely licking their chops over something like that. That's quite amazing. Thank you, Kelly.
But it goes to show, thank you, Kelly, but it goes to show this case is far from over. There are still gold nuggets in this case, even now.
And people have been working to try and sort of establish the Colburn timeline for November 3rd for a long, long time. And I think it's when is it recent that we got these time-stamped Manitowoc calls? Is that when did those come out? I'm not familiar with those.
Big Jeff, I had one question for you, Big Jeff, but since Kelly dropped that on us, now I have two questions for you, Big Jeff. So I don't even know if it's appropriate to put you on the spot like this. But my first question was going to be, do officers, and I've asked you this before, and that's why I'm asking you again, do officers with integrity tend to misreport their whereabouts by like 4 or 5 hours at a time?
I'm not sure why that's a question for me, but I would, if they do it on purpose, I would say that, if I were Link's lawyer, I might say that, well, there's a lot going on, and one day's easily like another, and you asked me about this day, and I thought it was that day, and I showed up in the day, and one day showed up at night the other time. What's the big deal? I'm off by a day. It's not like I'm lying. It's just that I'm misremembering. That's what I would say to if I were Link's lawyer. Well, I think Link has some explaining to do on, with regard to some of the things that he's been involved with. But
I mean, if he's saying that he's reporting one thing, he's saying one thing to one jury and saying another thing to another, or putting a different statement out, contradicting his whereabouts that are 4 to 5 hours off. And that's what we left off from the film, and that's the point that Dean was making. And so that was just my question to you, and that the answer is no. People, I mean, I knew the answer, Big Jeff. Sorry, but the answer is no. That the officers with integrity don't do that. But my second question, and it can be to anybody. It's not. I don't mean to single you out there, Big Jeff. But my second question that Kelly raised is, again, do officers with integrity misreport their activity like we've seen Colburn demonstrate, which Kelly just showed us? Is that what officers with integrity do? That's my question to you guys. And it's a loaded question. I know the answer. The answer is no, again. But it's just another little, piece that Netflix can use to tap away at his case.
I think we've been covering it in Foul Play and playing back some of the audio with the judge. And I think, in all honesty, this is going to be a real clusterfuck, sorry for the expression, for Greaseback and Colburn. It's not going to be the easy road that they thought. And the judge is laying it on the line for Greaseback to present documents, and the Greaseback doesn't want to do it. And not only that, there are over 4,000 emails involving a third party, right, which I'm not going to name. And that's going to be very, very interesting, because potentially it's broken confidentiality between the attorney and Colburn, right? Because now you've got a third party involved. It's going to get really, really messy. And you're right. And Colburn has the ability and demonstrated ability. He does not write reports, right? And he was asked, did you write a report about the key that he found? And the answer was no. Now, how do you explain that? It doesn't make any sense, guys.
And it doesn't help his case in defending that he's this perfect integrity officer.
I just want to also, I know this is a little bit off track, but just going back to what I just shared, again, shout out to Rookie for the incredible work and sharing that with everyone in the community. But that picture of Stephen and Chuck walking into Menards, there's obviously been, thought throughout the years that Blaine was with them because, originally Blaine said in one of his first statements, I think I went with them that time. I can't remember, or I got asked to go with them. That's right. And then there's a report from someone that was a worker, I believe, or someone made a report that when they saw Chuck and Stephen at Menards, they saw a young kid with them, like a younger boy, carrying stuff out or something. So a lot of people thought, oh, Blaine, it must have been the third. That, for me, that just kind of confirms that Blaine wasn't with them. He's not with them two walking in. And when you see them at the cash register, you don't see Blaine there either. So I think that you only ever see two of them. So I kind of think that is a fair judgment to finally rule Blaine out being there that night. In fact, when you go back and read Blaine's statement, he actually puts himself at the Avery salvage yard with another person doing a specific thing. So again, it's really, really interesting that, I've never seen that image before of them walking in with that timestamp. So I think it kind of just, it narrows it in and tightens that in, because I think, in fairness to all the people at the Avery salvage yard, they didn't know what day was what. I think it was just so insignificant. They didn't know what time they were doing one thing, what day was happening, and that's why there is such this big disconnection from each other, because they weren't aware of what the other one was doing, because they weren't paying attention, because they didn't know, they didn't care, and they weren't expecting law enforcement to start finger fucking them that they're a part of a murder case again. So I just wanted to throw that one out there, because, again, there's always been speculation that Blaine went with them, but it appears not.
Yeah, and the other, that's an excellent point, Kelly. And the other thing, I think, I believe that they looked at the items that were being purchased, right?
That's correct.
They were looking for, what was it? Cutting instruments?
Yes, because there is a phone call from a tip in from a lady that said that her and her husband watched Stephen and Chuck that night by I think I've spoken to this with Jeff Jones. I think I'm going to say it was a bone saw, is what they alleged. So I think that's when the law enforcement
a chop saw. In other words,
it was something like that. Yeah.
Kind of a saw that you have that you pull it down, and it's used to make a square cut on across the length of wood. So it's used to make 90-degree cuts on a piece of wood if you're doing a lot of 2x4 construction, for example. That's what you'd use. It probably has like a 10-inch blade, spins around at a very fast rate. You could easily dismember yourself accidentally. So it would be a good tool for dismembering a corpse, if that's what you had in mind. It'd be a better tool for putting together a porch and crivets.
They actually had a tip-off come in from a woman and her husband that watched them and was reporting that she was watching Stephen purchase this saw-like tool, which raised the eyebrows, obviously, of law enforcement, because later we find out that Teresa was dismembered and cut up. So they were obviously trying to find that link between the dismembering and Stephen, and they thought maybe go back to Menard's purchasing, which ironically, if I'm surprised that at this stage, instead of focusing on Brendan, if they obviously were tunnel vision to Stephen Avery, they had the most perfect co-conspirator with him, which was Chuck. I'm really shocked that they didn't narrow in on Chuck at these stages, because a lot of the days, when you look at all the testimonies and all the statements, it seems like Stephen was always around somebody, but Chuck seemed to be one of them that he was always around. So I'm actually shocked that they didn't start directing that narrative at one stage. Again, speculative, I know, but it's just that compound of having two men that had Chuck had the most tips come in about him, has the history. What I'm trying to say is, I'm just shocked that they didn't really honestly begin trying to form that narrative of the pair of them.
Good point. And Chuck. Sorry, BJ.
I was going to say, I think that as they were doing their initial questioning, or maybe even their post, November 9th questioning, they really do approach Earl and Chuck. I think if you listen to the Earl Avery interview, they actually say that, we're thinking this was a two-person job. Yeah. So I think they think they did do what you're suggesting, Kel, even if it was just to try and shake loose a few more comments about Steve. Oh my God, they might think I'm going to spill the beans on whatever I know against Stephen, just to so they're not going to pursue this two-person line of questioning, or put me as a second person anyway. But I do agree with you that there were a lot of tips that came in against Chuck. The Derping House one being one of the most interesting ones that so a relative said has Chuck saying we burned the bitch.
Yes.
Derping House is the person the last name of the person who said that. So Yeah, I agree.
I just
Again,
wanted
yeah,
to, my apology. I just wanted to say, I did start something. It's a bit time consuming, and I have a habit of starting things sometimes and getting so focused on one part of the detail that I end up doing a totally different project, and I don't ever usually go back to what I started. Because this case is about that. You start something and then you kind of go,
Rabbit
oh, I never
hole.
noticed that before, and then you end up in
Yeah.
another rabbit hole and going into a totally different detail than what you started with. But what I ended up starting, and I thought it was really good because, you know, we all talk about the tunnel vision on Stephen Avery, and I really wanted to see whether that was a real thing and if and when it could have started, if of course law enforcement didn't participate in all of, or if not any, planting. So what I started to do was, after the RAV4 was found on the Avery salvage yard in a certain amount of time out of the first 48 hours, I just wanted to capture if law enforcement investigated opportunity, means, and motive to other people other than Stephen Avery on that salvage yard. And I wanted to focus it on from the morning of the 5th of November when the RAV is found to the moment that Stephen was arrested on the 15th of November for the murder of Teresa Hallbuck, because I wanted to see that in between those dates from the 5th to the 15th, whether it was solely starting against Stephen Avery or whether they were investigating everyone on the salvage yard. Because when they found that RAV, it was just the vessel of the beginning of I'm going to say a beginning of a crime, but it didn't tie Stephen at that stage to anyone. So what I want to do is I wanted to capture at what points did it start, if there was any points, did they go, okay, maybe let's look at, like I was saying, Chuck Avery, let's look at Earl Avery, and let's see everyone on that salvage yard, whether it was them. And what I started to do was I actually started with Chuck, and how I ended up doing it was if you don't mind me sharing my screen for just 2 minutes, just to give you guys an idea, and then you guys can maybe give me direction if I even follow it or not. Okay, so I started with Chuck Avery, and I started on the 5th of November. And what I did was I went through and I pulled who that they interviewed in regards to, or who mentioned Chuck Avery. So I captured Earl Avery in why it was in the interview with Mark. What did he say about Chuck? What indication that Chuck could have been a part of something? And then I documented where to find it. And then I kind of go through. So on the 5th, there was twice on the 5th, Chuck comes up automatically. And then obviously what is the detail of why he came up. Then I kind of went to the 7th and I wanted to know, okay, on the 7th, what was happening on the 7th? Was his name being, dragged into it, and why? Again,
He
he
phones up Josh Radon.
Yeah.
Or,
so I had Josh Radon. So on the 7th, Josh had an interview with Mark Wiegert. You can find this on page 145. And Josh expresses that he received a phone call from Chuck himself. Josh thought that this was somewhat peculiar because he's never done that before. And the conversation was asking what was going on down there. And he expressed concern for the money and the business and such and such. So I went, okay, so on the 2nd, 7th, anything interesting happened? Nah, just having a look. And then I kind of went into, and then I found another one. On the 7th, Judith, now I don't want to butcher her last name, but it's like Knutson. She was one of the ones that rang up and kind of brought up how she was a little bit concerned that she had a dealing with Chuck. And she said, I had similar situation with Chuck in terms of interactions, a bit awkward. She found him strange. And I made a note to refer to statements made by Judith because it was more detail. Then I went into the 8th and then I found how many? I found 4. So on the 8th, I found 4 people used him again, and that goes into more detail. Michelle, interview with Wendy, and then I had more of a description. Now, the one thing that was interesting about Michelle was I also then started to record where I found the information and any further investigation from what they were told. And after Michelle, they did. They went an extra step further for Chuck. And how they did that was they went to the judge and requested to have, what was it? So they went to Judge Willis, who signed several subpoenas for investigation Wiegert, and it was a summons for Charles Avery's printed wireless phone records. So after they spoke to Michelle, they actually subpoenaed for his wireless records. So that was a little additional thing. And then I kind of go into it, and like I said, you've got 4 people that day. And then on the 9th, I've included all like my interviews and what I hear and all that stuff. By the time I finished with it, I think I believe there was like 4, 5, 6, 7, there was like 8 or 10 times between the moment that the RAB was found to Stephen being charged, his name came up in some pretty significant ways. And only 2 of those times was there a further investigation from what was brought up. So that's what I've been trying to capture, is just really fine detail of, were they looking beyond Stephen Avery? Were they looking beyond him? Because just because the RAB was found on this Avery salvage yard didn't automatically mean that Stephen Avery committed any crime, because there was numerous people on the salvage yard that day. So that is what I'm trying to do. I was thinking once I finish, and then in between that, I was going to add in like, what things that were found. So, you've got when the key was found, when you have the blood was found, and then you can keep an eye on where that turning point started happening. And I did a draft. This is me inputting it into a more finer detail. When I did the draft, ironically, I found that, basically that it changed with the key and the blood. So when the 10th come around, by the 10th, it was all over. They just completely didn't give a shit anymore. It was all about Stephen.
Yeah. The blood.
Yeah.
So here's a quiz for the panel in the chat. Of Chuck and Earl, which of those 2 have forensic evidence, or at least can be linked to forensic evidence of the murder, or some forensic evidence of, let's say, death? So I think that the cadaver dog sit on a laundry pile.
On Chuck's property, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Door.
That's right. And I thought that was a laundry pile too, if I'm not mistaken.
No, that was Earl.
Okay, all right.
he hid underneath some clothing. But that's a really interesting.
And Dolores Avery's golf cart, which Earl and
Fabian.
Robert Fabian, thank you. We're driving on the night of the first in their rabbit hunting. Why is the cadaver dog getting on Dolores Avery's golf cart? Right. So it's to say that Stephen was the only one where there was forensic evidence. Yeah, the blood on the RAV, I totally get that. But I think to Kel's point, having found this other cadaver dog evidence, was there any attempt to do any further testing? Tying it back to what we said, the stuff that's not there. It's not there? The reports of them trying to do anything, if they indeed did it. I get, to try and determine what might the source of that cadaver dog kit might be. So, nothing, as usual with this case. No further investigation.
Correct. But what they were trying to do, because I read the reports myself, they were trying to convince both Earl and Chuck that their brother had committed the murder, right? And they were shaking them both. You could tell whether they were going to try and come up with some type of incriminating statement to say, oh, yeah, that's right, I saw Steve do such and such, but they never said it. But Chuck made one very interesting comment. He goes, and this is an early statement, he goes, if there were shots fired on the salvage yard, I would have heard them. Right, Kelly? You remember that report? And I'm thinking to myself,
absolutely.
Who the hell mentioned gunfire? And this is an early report where Chuck goes, if there were any shots fired on the salvage yard, I would have heard about it. And guess what happens? What is the source of death? Shooting to the head. All right. What the hell is Chuck mentioning shooting? I think it was November, could be the 6th or the 9th. It was early. And he also talks about the end loader. He also talks about the end loader as well, which I'm sort of thinking, what the hell? Because
that's a very interesting point. Very interesting.
Their way of thinking was the car got put there using an end loader, right? Lifted up, put in. Also, to use a crusher, it's a two-person job. You got to pick up the vehicle, put it into the crusher with an end loader, operate it, then get rid of the shell of the car. So initially, and I agree with Kelly, they were scoping. They didn't care who they arrested as long as Stephen was one of them. So co-conspirators, no problems, right? And also you've got the November the 9th interview with Bobby Dassey, right? Which we've got on Foul Play, the audio, right? And what they ask him is very interesting as well, you know? So they were looking at different people. I agree with Kelly. The moment that blood came back as genomic DNA from Stephen Avery, party over. The key, party over.
I mean, to come back around to the point, I mean, we kind of really unloaded a lot of interesting evidence as to why they could have pointed the finger at Chuck and said, and pressured him to turn against his own brother and pressured him. Why did they go after Bobby? And I think maybe the answer is because he admitted to putting eyes on her. And I think that was the, if that would not have happened, they would have went through everybody trying to find somebody who would have broke and said it. But, you know, by Bobby admitting that he saw her, I don't think that they could go after Chuck then. If he wouldn't have said he saw her, this may have changed a lot.
Correct. So he saw Teresa at the same exact time that Stephen Avery did. They both observed her come onto the property. Right? So the two are equal. They both saw the eventual victim at the same time.
To Mr. Avery, that key in the big picture, in the big scheme of things here, means very little.
We do not and have never claimed that the police killed Teresa Halbach. However, the person or persons who did knew exactly who the police would really want to blame.
Despite Mr. Buting standing up here saying, look, folks, we're not saying that the cops killed Teresa Halbach. What we're saying is that somebody else skillfully exploited law enforcement bias, as if there's somebody smart enough out there that could do that. But when you scrape one layer of this manure off of the topsoil, you'll realize that the cops had to kill her. Now, are you as the jury, in order to find Mr. Avery not guilty, willing to say that your cops, that your Manitowoc County Sheriff's deputies, Lieutenant Link, Sergeant Colburn, came across a 25-year-old photographer, killed her, mutilated her, burned her bones, all to set up and to frame Mr. Avery? You've got to be willing to say that. You've got to make that leap.
He's setting a false narrative for the jury. It has to be this one or the other one. It can't be no shades of gray here, right?
I just two comments. If I was Judge Willis, I would have demanded a drug test of Ken Kratz to work out what the fuck he was on, what he was smoking. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm using the wrong analogy. He's doing a straw man argument. He's setting up a scenario that nobody set up but himself and then trying to knock it down. He's inventing a scenario. And the defense team, Strang and Buting, is saying, who the fuck mentioned that the cops killed Teresa Halbach? And yet, what does Ken Kratz do? Yeah, they didn't actually say it, but you got to believe that the cops killed Teresa Halbach. You've got to take that leap, right? So he's setting up an argument, a false argument that the defense never brought up, and trying to mock the defense for bringing up an argument they never brought up. And the jury must be thinking, what the fuck? I can't believe the judge didn't say, Mr. Kratz, it's you that's bringing up that scenario, not the defense. So he's manipulating the jury and the judge.
And his whoppers are growing, right, in magnitude. He just had to get done. If you look at the course of his his closing argument, he had to admit that he didn't have any forensic evidence in the house. Then he had to admit that, well, what if the key was planted? Maybe it was. You shouldn't look at it. That shouldn't matter to you, right? And now he's like, okay, but now what you have to believe is the cops killed her, if because that's the only possible conclusion that you can come to. What is that the sign of somebody who is in utter desperation, or isn't it? Who is going to believe that bullshit?
It 100% correct. And mind you, I spent nearly a year analyzing his book. So I know Ken Kratz pretty well. And the way he goes, and he even admitted it. I win at all costs. Even if that means he said the right word, manure. He's full of shit. Not the defense. He is. And so he's daring the judge and daring the defense. I'm going to say whatever crap I want. You try and counter argue it, right? So he's desperate. He knows the case against Stephen is tenuous at best. It is circumstantial evidence at best. He knows he can't bring up Brendan Dassey because the defense will destroy him and Brendan will recant on stand. So he's now going for his big stick, pointing a finger at the cops, telling the jury, see these fine officers here? Do you really think they killed Teresa Halbach? Despite the fact that the defense said, we never said they killed Teresa Halbach, but somebody exploited it, right? Somebody exploited the natural hate that the MTSO had for Stephen. And everyone in the county knew Stephen had a $36 million civil suit. And Big Jeff, who was just about to be deposed, who were the two big enchiladas
that would be
just about to be deposed?
That would be Kasurek and Vogel.
And Vogel! Boom!
So I mean, the thing is, his argument is ludicrous on its face. How can you go from, so what if the key was planted? Maybe the key was planted. We might have planted this, which is evidence of the exact law enforcement bias that he says can't possibly exist because nobody's smart enough to exploit it.
Now he's admitting it. Now he's admitting
it's prima facie, false on its face, right? It's argument he defeated his own argument by what he says in two subsequent
correct.
Books.
The defense has been arguing about planting, and Ken Kratz is saying, yeah, there was a little bit of planting. Don't worry about it. What the hell?
Doesn't make any sense
at
at all.
We didn't kill her. Like, that's what it comes off as. We didn't plant it, but at least they didn't kill her, right? Like, that's all that's
right.
the argument is. Well, they didn't kill her. Maybe they planted, but it's true. And these embedded confessions and whatnot, and the way that they tie themselves up in knots with their own statements, anyway.
You can decide this case, if you choose, on the evidence in the courtroom, and only the evidence in the courtroom. You have the power to do that. So I ask you, please, give it your full and fair consideration. Do that critically here as citizens of Manitowoc County, where we stayed to pick a jury.
I don't believe it's a difficult decision because everything in this case pointed towards one person, towards one defendant. I'm thanking you at the conclusion of this case on behalf of the state of Wisconsin and urging you to follow the court's instructions, to follow the evidence in the case, and return verdicts of guilty. Thank you. Thank you, Judge.
The quick comment I want to make. Notice how many people he said were involved in killing Teresa Halbach? One. So this is the crazy motherfucking scenario that does my head in. We have one victim. We have two murder scenarios, and we've got two people going to prison. Even though he just said one person was involved in all the mayhem, raping, mutilation, murder, dismemberment, one person. So Ken Kratz is basically saying he did it all. Then how the hell did his team convict Brendan Dassey, a 16-year-old kid with no forensic evidence against him? This man has no shame. None.
Well, from the shameless to the shameful. Wait, I don't know how that works.
Wait a minute, it's my turn to go first.
I'm just kidding, Big Jeff.
No, I get it.
It's that time of the episode where we do our wrap-up comments. So I will send it on over to Big Jeff to give us a recap of today and anything that else you'd like to add. Thanks,
Well,
Big Jeff.
For the full 12 minutes, there's not much to pick from. But certainly what you saw on full display, as we've been saying for the past 2 hours or so, was our friend Ken Kratz admitting that he had nothing, but willing to say anything, because he viewed this more, as Dr. Silkman pointed out from his book, as more of a need for victory than a pursuit of fairness. In my opinion, does Stephen Avery deserve a new trial? Absolutely. I don't think that trial was fundamentally fair in any way. The state, had to pull out all the stops. That included potential constitutional violations in, refusing them to let Denny's. I mean, why not? I think it's fair. You could. They didn't have to object to those Denny's. They just did. To stacking the jury with relatives of Manitowoc County officials, including the father of one of the sheriff's deputies. They pulled out all the stops, and yet when they walked in, as we know from from Mark's interview, or from Rick Mahler, it was still 7 not guilty. They really felt that the defense piled on the horseshit. That would be great to know. I mean, I would really like to hear more about what went on in that jury room. Let's not forget, one of the things that we didn't mention in the episode was that in that interview, the juror Mahler claims that the one person who did speak to the media, who was the foreman, someone showed up in his driveway, short time later, after he discussed with the media, claiming that there had been a 911 call made from that house. You have the right as a police officer to sort of 911 call. You go in and you look around. So, what police officer do you think showed up, according to the this hearsay from Mahler? None other than Andrew Coburn himself shows up. And if you, so, there was still a good amount of intimidation. We know that Remacher was, what's the right word, sanctioned, or had right up in his personal file, because he entered the jury room to help deliver pizza. Was this an act of intimidation? Were people intimidated by this? Were they afraid to talk about the planting done by the cops, or in front of a cop? They knew damn well he had been in the
Wait, Big Jeff, I'm going to make the comment.
Okay.
So not only do your cops murder people, they deliver pizza as well.
That's right.
They deliver pizza.
Now, I can't say whether there was pineapple on that pizza or not, so we're going to have to debate about that at another time. But really, I just that's sort of my recap and addition. So on to the next.
Well, Big Jeff, I just really quickly, there's a quote you like to make of Al Bundy, and I think it fits here with Colburn and the way that Colburn says his integrity's been questioned, etc. What's that quote again, Big Jeff?
Yes, it's not the clothes that make you look fat; it's the fat that makes you look fat.
That's right. And in this case, it's Colburn's actions that made him look shady, not the editing of a Netflix film. And I think that that's a really fun analogy to look at that. Dr. Silkman, wrap up comments for today.
Well, I just want to say what a fantastic series of discussions from the team. We've only gone into like 12 minutes in the episode, and we spent nearly 2 hours. I think it goes to show now that with our knowledge and experience, we learn new things, as Kelly pointed out with what AC Rookie presented. There are gold nuggets here, and I think we're truly blessed that we can do this presentation because we learn new things all the time. And I'm looking forward to the next episode. Awesome.
Thank you, Dr. Silkman. And Kelly, do you have any comments for us as we head off into the abyss?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I'd hate to say it and I hate to refer to it because it just seems so cheap now because it's dragging a dead horse over coals. But this is why I do appreciate when they televised or aired the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case, because we as viewers got to watch it in real time and we weren't getting gaslighting. Well, the mainstream media always try to gaslight, but we were able to see it for ourselves. And I think this case, Making a Murderer was a documentary that, let's not call bullshit a bullshitter, but it was edited in favorable to Stephen Avery to a degree. But that's not on him. They were asked, everyone had opportunity to bring forth their conclusions and their opinions. You see it at the end. Every ending, there was, we asked for these people to participate and they rejected. So everyone was fairly given that opportunity. They just chose not to take it. But I think that Making a Murderer captures what we as people that have instincts, and we're not stupid. The world is not stupid. As much as the mainstream media try to direct us in a narrative that they want, this is how I'm now seeing Making a Murderer. The documentary itself was just a capture of the parts that us as the viewers and potentially jury members, because that's what you kind of felt like when you were watching the Johnny Depp and Amber case. You became a juror. And I would obviously go and watch all the lawyers commentate about, what it all means. And then they would sit there and go, oh, that's a really bad day for Johnny and Amber this and Amber that. And a few times I wrote to them and I said to them, you're talking as a lawyer. We're actually more powerful than you guys right now. You should be listening to us because we don't have legal expertise. We're not looking at this case going, oh, that's a hearsay moment or whatever. We're looking at it and we're letting our instincts and our feelings that we've learned as humans direct us in what's right and what's wrong. So, and that's what I feel about this case. And that goes back to the Andy Colburn thing. Yes, there might have been parts that was edited on his behalf, but overall, Andy Colburn is the reason why Andy Colburn is looked like a fucking idiot. He brought this upon himself. It doesn't take a documentary to point that out. Everyone watched it and everyone could see it. It's our instinct. We connect. We body analyze people every day. That's how we communicate. We evolve. And that's basically what I just wanted to say in terms of this wrap up, because I think we focus a little bit more on, the dynamics of Andy and then when we had again, Rookie, a shout out. Thank you so much for sharing that new little information that you've brought forward to the community. I just wanted to touch base on that because in overall sense, we are talking about a documentary, but that documentary was captured, and in fairness, I think as the crime and crime goes forward, that it should be televised, especially high profile cases, because you get to see it, you get to judge it, you get to have that moment. And the only thing I will say is when I really felt when Dean was saying that last closing and he said, please, really take the time to go back and really think about everything. This is an innocent man. You guys have the chance to save this man basically for the second time. And you know what the saddest thing is? As much as it was powerful and I believed in what he was saying, I actually believed he even believed what he was saying versus Ken, who just dribbled shit and was throwing spaghetti at walls and was just like, cops killed her. You think, just was over dramatic, versus Dean, who really delivered home a very emotional closing. All I kept thinking was what this Richard from the jury guy said. Or what was his name? Was it Richard? My apology if I'm wrong.
Mahler.
Yeah. That there's that one juror there that was arms folded across going, he's guilty as fuck. And unfortunately, maybe that's all it took. That one man to change everything. And that's sad because that's not justice.
So I appreciate you guys coming on again and sharing your insight. And thank you again, Kelly, for taking another dig, sharing some more information with us. I think that helps bring clarity to exactly the point we were making about finding other suspects, and there were other viable suspects. And so that really helped me kind of clear up a few things. And, going into this, I really didn't take a lot of interest in the Andrew Colburn Netflix case. I thought it was fluffy, or it was, it ain't gonna go anywhere. There's no teeth in that. That's kind of the attitude I had. But as the time goes on, I can see that there is relevance, and it is spinning off new information and about the case that we didn't previously know, and so it is extremely relevant to what we're talking about today. I just want to say thanks to everybody who's in the chat. Shout out to all you guys who've been here. And we will be back again. Thanks for coming back after our little hiatus there on our summer break. We should be back onto a regular schedule and see you next week. This has been Discussing a Murder.